can't see, I'm here in the back of the room. I could dance, I could party. Woo-hoo-hoo. So this is the future, and you're going to see more people using these avatars. I wanted to start the panel off by a virtual representation of myself. And if you look to the back of the room, you know I'm here in the back of the room. And this is where we're at in terms of the future of media. Check, check. All right, we're going to do this talk show style. We're going to start with questions first. I'm joking. Okay. So we had some technical difficulties in the beginning, so we're going to see if we're able to get over those technical difficulties and see if I can share this presentation with you guys. So I'm going to start off by introducing my esteemed panel. To my left is the genius, Prashant Shah. Prashant, 4 years ago, did my podcast, and he told me what was coming. It's just uncanny, his ability to see the future, to see around corners. And so Prashant has worked in many guises. He's a very well accomplished producer, working both in India, Hollywood, here in Miami, around the world. In addition to that, he is a tech guru. And so he's in the front in terms of the charge towards the transformation in this industry. And I don't know if people in this room, and you can show me by your hands, have heard of metaverse. Yeah, you can thank Mark Zuckerberg for that. So that is a big part of the future of the industry. And that future comes from this evolution. And that evolution, whoa, this is like, whoa. Maybe if I was down here, that's great. Oh, yeah, there. And this evolution started, I would say, maybe a decade ago with virtual reality. And then it evolved into what's called augmented reality. And now it's evolving into that next stage, which is the metaverse. But when I mentioned virtual reality, I wanted to have somebody on this panel who's been working in that space and has really carved out a place for himself in that space. I have Mr. Ronald Baez here, who is a VR storyteller. I would say more than anything, so I'm very happy to have you here, Mr. Baez. I guess they took my computer away because they're trying to figure things out. So, but I can get it started even without the presentation. And I'm going to tell you my other panelist, his name is Dean Ryan. And so you saw him here on the Zoom. He's a visual effects guru. He was the visual effects supervisor for many films. But one noted film that people know him from is Lord of the Rings. So I don't know if anyone knows of that film. Right. He's the guy that blew up the White House in Independence Day. So I don't know if you know that film. He blew up the asteroid in Armageddon. And, you know, he's blown up many things in his career. And I wish that he was here to hear that. So Dean is also a tech guru. So he's leading the charge of this movement forward. And he's also the chief technology officer of a company that I have, that the avatar that you just saw that I came in with, that is also a mark of the future, because what you're going to be able to do is to enter these spaces, these metaverses, utilizing avatars, and you'll be able to utilize your avatars in any kind of video telecommunication. So Zoom, Facebook Messenger, Google Chat. I love using my avatars, what we call it, because, you know, I'm talking to people and then I walk around the room, I'm eating, I go take a shower, I can do anything and no one really knows what I'm doing. that's another big exciting point. So I'm gonna go in reverse since I don't have my presentation. And I'm gonna start with Mr. Prasad Shah. And I wanna get your word on this future, the metaverse, NFTs, blockchain, and how that fits into the already exciting pipeline of what's going on.
Well, thank you, Kevin, for that small introduction. I'm not a guru or anything. I'm a college dropout. But at the same time, I think where the technology part comes in, it's no longer a future, it's here. I think it was 4 years ago we talked about this, where myself as a producer, we have difficult times in trying to get dates of actors or talents. And how do we solve that? How do we utilize that in terms of creating avatars of those talents? And it has been happening in music industry for quite some time, where a lot of music composers and directors, they take the voice of the singer and just it's one scale they'll take, and then they'll compose that voice into modulation and create an entire song without that singer being into the recording room. That has been happening for almost a decade, but that is on the audio side. And here we were talking 4 years ago that how do we create the same formula into the video assets by bringing the actor into a room and doing a 360 scan of the body, and which is done with the animals in Planet of the Apes. There was a film that I shot with a chimpanzee, and of course the chimpanzee is moody, so we have to create an avatar of that chimpanzee in order to bring it through VFX into a live mode and create the actions and reactions between an animal and another talent or a human. But at the same time, how do we replace that, what we did with an animal, how do we replace that into talents, into human, where I don't need Tom Cruise for entire 40 days or 60 days, just bring him into one room, create his avatar, and which you see, I'm sure you guys have seen half animated films and half live action films, which has to do with whether it's a basketball and a rabbit playing the game. And if that can be put on one screen, how do we create, instead of the rabbit, it could be the same person or another person, a human live action, creating the gap that we as a producer do not have the luxury of booking 100 days or 200 days or 50 days of a talent and creating that avatar and creating the cinema through digital technologies. And I think that has been done for almost a decade. It's just now we're giving it a new name, calling it metaverse, of course. It's the fashion, it's a trend, give a new name, and all of a sudden people are engaged into creating this avatar or creating a conversation and creating the technology use, which is all in front of us. It's just we don't see it. And that is what is becoming a norm now. In terms of NFTs and cryptos, that is all, crypto is, of course, everybody knows what it is, what it means in terms of currency. Well, why do I need a paper that says $1 or $100 when I could have a digital format of that currency, and I don't need to go to my bank or do online banking to do a wire transfer into another country and has to have a SWIFT code or have a transaction that a bank decides what the value of that currency is today as opposed to yesterday or day after tomorrow? Why can it not be a database currency that is determined by technology as opposed to government determining the currency value? So that's on the crypto side, but that is also becoming a norm now. And in terms of financing and funding, that we go to banks or lenders or private equity for fundraising, it can be done through NFTs, which is a tokenization about paying or fundraising, and that is going to be the next part of ecosystem where we see this evolution coming into the world of media. Eventually, media is the first, I think, an example that sets the tone for the rest of the business models. And because media creates the awareness and creates the market share, and I think that is where the world is leading into. And we as media professionals try to find a new way of creating this modernization or creating the next fashion that is going to be the trend. And we are not the trendsetters. I think it's the human who are the trendsetters, the audience who are the trendsetters, because they have to adopt into the new verse. And I think we are not far away where people are already doing Apple Pay, which is, if you look at it, it's technically a digital currency you're doing it. You're not giving an actual cash or a bill or a paper, which is determined by a government to say it's 100 or a 50 or 20 denomination. So same thing is going to happen, and it's here. Transactions are taking place. And I think it's not more of an evolution, but, and also metaverse, if somebody asked me this morning, what exactly is metaverse? It's no different than universe. Meta is the collection of data, and the verse is where we exist. So it is the new or the existing technology that's coming into play into the mankind, starting with the media industry first.
Wow, that was an answer. So I'm just going to speak on a couple of the points, and then I'm going to throw it to my storytelling friend here, he's a filmmaker as well, and he started out as a filmmaker. And so he's translating those skills now into the VR space. And I can't wait to work with him. I have not worked with him yet, but I can't wait to work with him. But what's really cool about what Prashant said is we are blessed, one of my companies is blessed to have a show that we just got a network deal. And so the show, we think, is going to be the first show that's cast from the metaverse. The show is populated by the avatars that you all saw. So you saw, we call it, the name of the company is Zavatar. And so we call our avatars Zavatars. So the show will be populated by those avatars. Now, the Zavatars themselves, we're working with artificial intelligence and machine learning. So what you'll be able to do, I was using vocal recognition and facial recognition, if anybody turned back and you saw me kind of moving and stuff like that. But what we're going to be able to do with artificial intelligence is the artificial intelligence and the machine learning, they learn your gestures over time. So in about 2 to 3 weeks or so, you'll be able to turn off your facial recognition, and it becomes autonomous. So your avatar will be able to move just by your voice. What you saw there is just from the shoulders to the head. Right now, we're working on the development from the waist up to the chest, and by the first quarter of next year, it'll be full body. So your avatar will be able to move just like you without having the camera on, just your voice. What does that do? Well, Prashant just talked about, let's say you're a celebrity and you can't be, 2, 3, 4 places at once. What we can do is we can take that celebrity's voice and pipe it into their avatar, and it just moves. And we're already doing it. We have a podcast where we just take the voices of some of the celebrities that we interview and we pipe it into their avatars. At the same time, people are going to be able to download those for themselves. I think we'll have those available the second quarter of next year, and they'll be able to use their avatars throughout our metaverse and for visual telecommunication. So this evolution, just like Prashant said, is happening right now. It's the future because not a lot of people know about it. But I can tell you, the reason why I asked everyone if they've heard about metaverse by a show of hands is if I would have asked that question at the beginning of the year, January, I bet there would not have been that many hands that were raised. Facebook, which has turned into Meta, they put metaverse on the map. And so that allowed more people to understand. But all these things are happening in the background. And so for storytellers, these are just tools. And when you know about the technology, you can utilize your storytelling abilities to utilize these tools to help you to tell your stories in different ways. So I want to pass it off to Ronald, who is an accomplished filmmaker and that has moved into the VR space. The VR space is going to be a huge activation for the metaverse, and you're going to see more about what's happening with VR over the next year, 2 years, as the prices come down on the headsets, and you start to get augmented reality headsets, and there'll be a free headset that'll be ad-supported in about 1.5 years. And so that'll really, really further the adoption of this. So, Ron, can you give us a little bit about first as a filmmaker and you're pushed then into VR, and then your take on storytelling in the VR space.
Sure. So, I'm over slightly. Apparently, so first, I think it's very useful to simplify all of this because it's turns people off. Frankly, like that's the reality. So, first, the metaverse is separate from meta. Metaverse is not some kind of proprietary thing. It's literally just the place. It's a digital space where human interactions happen. So, an expansive definition of the metaverse can include text messaging. It's really simple. All of you have been participating in the metaverse for the better part of 20 years. The second thing is looking at the way that storytelling develops and how different kinds of technologies, whether it's VR, AR, what we call XR, which is kind of cross reality. So if we're using XR and VR at the same time, or if we're using MR or whatever, forget all of these different things. It's very simple. What kind of interaction are you trying to have? People don't consume technology, they consume content. Technology is a conduit. And so from that perspective, you're asking, what are you trying to make? What are you trying to say? What are you trying to show? What are you trying to experience? It's the same question that you would ask in a writer's room. The question becomes what's the relative technology that's being involved, and that's not a new question. Filmmakers have been looking at that since the 1920s. Photographers have been looking at that since the 1870s. Like, this is not a relatively new question. It's just a new application. You're looking at the development of storytelling changing by virtue of the fact that a technology is being developed that gives more access or previously kind of distant access to an aspect of the human condition. That's what we're looking at. And so from that perspective, you might ask a question with a show like Modern Family, how can we access an aspect of the human condition which is more honest? Right? That's the whole premise of the show Modern Family. Well, that same premise can be accessed in a million different ways. If I'm going to create a series and I want to put that inside of a VR space, the question becomes why the VR space? Not necessarily, the technology is so impressive and oh my God, I get to put on a headset, I'm so excited. So from that perspective, I think as storytellers and as content creators and as content distributors, the question that you want to ask is what is the technology useful for in terms of your understanding of what it is to be human and how you can express that to another human being. From a storytelling perspective, that's the goal, because that's what content is. It's the reason why we laugh at TikToks, because they're funny, because they're relative. And so I think it's important not to separate the immersive space, whether it's AR or VR or XR or whatever, into this fancy place that only people with like an understanding of development can access. I think it's important to understand that the space, like any other artistic space or like any other technical space, doesn't only come down to utility. It also comes down to creating relative access to the human condition from a storytelling perspective. Now, are there additional utilities? Yeah, of course. You can create avatars, you can save some money on having actors in space. That's all of this is true. But ultimately, if you work in media, you work in storytelling. That's what you work in. And so from that perspective, I think that one thing that happens a lot, and it's the reason why immersive media tends to struggle to create a global market when it comes to comparing it to old media. We call it flat media inside of like the VR space, is because it's difficult to understand the relativity of what a network would do inside of this space. That's the reality of it. And this promise of the technology does not come without a responsibility to actually understand that a technologist is not going to create content for your audience. Storytellers will. That's the reality of it. The technologists are there to facilitate the creation of that content. And so one thing I think that a lot of executives should ask themselves is how is this relative to the storytelling that's being created already in my space? And how can this novel access via this relative new technology create a different type of story? And we shouldn't, as immersive storytellers or kind of like working in emerging technologies, think that a technology is going to create something that's like wholly different. What it will create is a new access, but it's a similar human story. If not, the audience won't care. Because again, audiences don't consume technology, they consume content from a media perspective. So I think there's some challenges there, but I think a lot of those challenges have to do with perspective. And you can see this shifting, especially when you look at international immersive markets, inside of the context of storytelling getting a foothold inside of emerging technologies and immersive media relative to technologists. And technologists right now dominate that space, which is why gaming is working so well inside of VR. But you are seeing a shift in that, especially when people start understanding kind of how to build lines between their existing business models and this technology that they're starting to be less and less intimidated by.
Wow. That's great. Another incredible answer.
And really, it's storyteller driven. That's what's going to attract people. And now that this technology is going to become more accessible, the storytellers, our producers, our writers, our directors, the people that drive the industry will be able to use these tools to move towards this bright new future. I'm just going to give you two figures. By 2024, the metaverse industry will be an over $800 billion industry. By 2030, it'll be over $5 trillion. So there's a reason why this evolution is happening. I'm going to give you another fact. Bob Iger, who was the CEO and chairman of Disney, retired at the beginning of the year. He immediately went to a metaverse company and invested in that metaverse company, and then that metaverse company, they very quickly raised over $100 million. So there are a lot of companies entering the space, but really metaverse is integrative. That's the biggest thing. So you want to think about how the metaverse integrates with the traditional media and integrates with other mediums. So I wanted to start with this because, you know, it's space, it's boundless, it's endless. This is one of my companies, it's called Zavatar. And our show takes place on a space station parked right outside of Earth. So you can see the space station. And the set is right there inside the space station. We've already covered those things. So I have another company, and I've been working in this space for a long time. So this is one of my projects. It's called the Beach Chronicles. And it allowed me to explore and to expand different concepts and ideas to really jump into the space. So I'm going to show you guys just some different areas that the project has explored. And that's everything from, you know, animation to VR. You're not going to be able to see that one of those segments is VR because it's on a flat screen. And then you're going to see some AR. So that's an integrative way. I mean, we have a comic book. You saw the comic book. It has some AR on it. So we have an app. You can open the app. You point it at the comic book. And then in different places in the comic book, you can see different things happening. In that case, you saw a motorcycle. But also there was a segment in there, like you said, you're not going to see it in VR. But we have a segment that we did in VR. It won many, many, many awards. And we have a traditional animation. One of my favorite actors, Tommy Flanagan, I had to put him in there. He became a part of the project because he really loved the concept of this immersive media. Immersive and integrated media, I think, is really an important way to think about this. So this is an example of an ecosystem of how the future can work. So What we call our metaverse is the Zataverse because it survives across many different platforms. AR, VR, we have live events. And as I said, we have a show that's going to be on terrestrial TV, so you'll be able to watch it on a network. And what people will be able to do is come into that show. If you're in the audience, you come as your avatar, so you're his avatar. Our hosts, as you saw, the hosts are Zavatars. The guests that come in that we interview, they come as avatars. If you're competing, because it's a competition show, if you're a musician competing, you come in as his avatar, and you can see everything that's going on. You'll be able to see the space station, you'll be able to see the hosts, and people on television, if you're watching it on television, it'll look like a regular show. But if you come in as your avatar self, you'll be able to walk around and see what's going on. If you're in the audience, of course, you're going to have to stay seated. And that's how this whole evolution is happening. So what we've been able to do is partner with a lot of different companies. Ovation is our network partner. We're working with Verizon, strategic partnerships with branding and sponsorship companies. So what you're going to be able to do is see different brands throughout our metaverse, which we call the Zataverse. Gibson is going to come on as a sponsor, so for the musicians that are in the show, they're going to have a room, and it's going to be like all guitars and stuff like that. And that's a way to monetize what you're doing. And then these are some of the products. So I said the Sync Report, which is our show. And then we have NFTs that are connected to the show, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then, of course, the Zavatar avatars, which, like I said, people will be able to download, I think, in the first or second quarter of next year. There's also other projects that we're going to have in our metaverse. And that's what's going to be really interesting about these metaverses, is that you'll be able to explore different areas, different projects that you'll be able to experience. One thing that I'm excited about is this. The VR documentaries, you'll be able to go to a metaverse, and let's say you want to go to India in your metaverse and you see it on the map. You can go to India and you click on a link, and if you have on your VR headset, you'll be able to see everything that's going on. A virtual documentary. That really has me excited because documentary is a huge core of what I'm doing, but it's all about storytelling. This is a small sample of what we're doing with our metaverse. These are some of the environments. So you'll see that you can go back in time, you can go forward in time. You'll be able to explore space, you'll be able to go underwater. That's a transforming spaceship from our show. And that's the host of our show, Colin O'Donoghue.
Welcome to the Sync Report.
And so all we need is Colin O'Donoghue's voice, and it moves just by itself. So these are some of the players that are in the market. Snapchat, everybody knows that Snapchat, well, not everybody, but if you know Snapchat, they have like their virtual filters that you can put over the face. It's not as immersive and experiential, but there's different entryways into the marketplace. It's all about kind of integrating all of these different ways to participate. With our particular metaverse, you'll be able to just use your computer to get in, your arrow keys. You'll be able to use your tablet or your phone and just kind of point to where you want to go. Of course, if you have a VR headset, you'll be able to get more of immersion. And then we also have an augmented version. So they have augmented glasses that you put on, and you'll be able to kind of see things in front of you in the real space. Ready Player Me, that's an avatar company. And so you can get avatars from them right now, and you can use it for various things. They're not the cheapest in the world, but they're pretty nice. They're pretty awesome. Not as good as ours, by the way. And then you have this company called Sandbox. So Sandbox became popular because Snoop Dogg, I think he has a mansion in Sandbox. And so he has like all these events that go on and all these things, and they sell real estate. So the real estate in Sandbox, I think next to Snoop Dogg's house, is selling for like $450,000. Like for real, in real money, not in virtual money, like real cash. And so you will be able to do things like buy the real estate and do these kind of things. But I'm going to tell you, then this is an anecdote. Something that, for me, the utility, and that's what Ron talked about, utility, that makes me excited is you'll be able to visit places that maybe you haven't been to or you want to go to. So let's say you want to go to the Louvre, for example. You'll be able to visit the Louvre, and before you get there, see exactly where you want to go and have it all mapped out. So when you actually go there, you won't waste time walking around all over the place, like I did when I went there 3 years ago. I only had 4 hours. I probably saw like a 16th of things. And so you have another platform called Decentraland, and so that's the one in the orange. And so that's another one that has like celebrities doing concerts, and it's a decentralized space, so you can buy real estate too. And so you'll be able to do those in these metaverses, and we're doing build outs in a lot of these metaverses for some of our clients. And I'm gonna let Prashant talk a little bit about what he's doing in the metaverse with his company, if he cared to. Okay. Yeah, you can, yeah, please.
So, what Kevin was talking about, real estate is not the actual real estate you go to a realtor to buy. It's technically in the metaverse where celebrities or non-celebrities, they have their properties into the metaverse, which is virtual real estate. You cannot touch, feel, or sense it, but mentally it can stimulate you where you buy these properties, and in exchange you have a value that creates a proposition that has more than just a tangible outlet or a tangible transaction and beyond that. So what Kevin was talking about, Sandbox and things like that, where he gave an example of Snoop Dogg. I have a company based out of Hong Kong and Abu Dhabi. We are creating metaverse where we are actually creating countries, we are creating nations. So we have a Hong Kong metaverse where we are creating the entire Hong Kong on metaverse. We just signed a agreement with 2 other countries, Madagascar and with Mauritius. So if you Google Madagascar into metaverse, and you'll see a company called MetaSense, which is part of my company. And we are creating technology for the entire nation as opposed to an individual or a product or a water bottle company. We are creating the nation on metaverse, no different than what Star Wars has created on the virtual, through cinema. There's a space, there are people living on a space and so forth. And fast forward, Richard Branson is now doing the tours, and Tesla is now setting up tours to go into the space. It's very similar to that. We are creating metaverse for different nations out there, including the banking systems, where a bank will have the presence virtually to do the transactions, to buy the real estate next to a celebrity or away from a celebrity or whatever may that be. It all sounds very crazy, and no matter how much coffee you drink, it will not stimulate you until you literally go into the technology space and understand where is this all going. And is this all real? It's not hypothetical, it's not crazy, but these are governments now getting involved, and we are dealing with governments directly. We're not dealing with Century 21, or we're not dealing with Coldwell Bankers type of companies to do real estate, but this is all created through digital technology, where actual large corporations like Toll Brothers or big organizations who are into real estate creating the metaverse out there for the digital space. And this is happening. It's not something that is future, it is here. And we are signing contracts with the government to create that metaverse. And in that country that we create, then people and embassies and consulates will buy their virtual land, and through that they'll create transactions of Britain wants to sell to America, or America wants to sell to Hong Kong, or Singapore wants to sell to Thailand. It will be all created through digital space, as opposed to physically a sales rep going and doing what they need to do.
And that's amazing. That's amazing. And so, like I said, it's this exchange of, being able to operate in the virtual space. And as I said at the top, it's going to allow people to participate that haven't traditionally been able to participate. It'll allow people to go to places that maybe they haven't been able to go to and visit those places. And hey, who knows? Maybe you'll visit a place, you'll love it so much you'll want to go in the physical space. But it's the convergence of all these things. We have coming up in September a live event in Ireland. And we're also going to have part of that event in the virtual space. So people will be able to participate in the virtual space in that event at the same time as participating in the live space. So it's this connectivity. It's about connection. And I have to say that storytelling element. So we have my friend, Mr. Dean Lyon, who we're trying to plug him back in. And he is, or if we are able to plug him in, was going to talk about LED technology. So I don't know if anyone here knows about the new studios that are done with LED screens. The Mandalorian, that's right. So the Mandalorian was one of the first to start that. By show of hands, how many people know about this new technology? Oh, great. So the way that plugs into all of this is there is a software called Unreal Engine. There's kind of two softwares, Unreal Engine and Unity, but I think Unreal has kind of taken the pole position. And so Unreal Engine, a lot of people are doing their metaverse build-outs in Unreal Engine, but Unreal Engine also is a driver for the new technology, the LED screens. So they can replace green screen in a way, because I saw the hands, a lot of people already know about it. Instead of using green screen, you have LED screens, and you have the environments like right behind you. And so for actors, it's great because they can interact with the environments. For producers and for editors and for the entire production pipeline, well, you already have that background when you import it into your timeline. And so you just have to kind of tweak it and play with it. But just imagine, if anyone has worked with green screen, you don't have to key anything out. You don't have to rotoscope, which is like my worst thing. Everything is already there. And I don't know anyone here if they've rotoscoped before. But it's frame by frame. It's arduous. And so,
in a nutshell, it will eliminate VFX.
In a nutshell, I mean, you're still going to need it for the backgrounds and for the things that are going on, but it'll eliminate one layer of the visual effects. But the fact that you'll be using this Unreal Engine means you can use a lot of those assets for metaverse. You can use a lot of those assets for virtual productions. And so there's going to be a pipeline where you'll be able to utilize a lot of the materials that you're creating in different ways and repurpose them and use them over and over and over again. That makes me super excited because, when I can use things over and over and over again, it saves time, it saves money, it saves energy. I'm a conservationist, so that really works for me in a lot of different ways. And if you even look at some of these bullet points, replace construction, it minimizes crews, reduces lighting requirements. And then you see it says Mandalorian technology. So Mandalorian was the first show to kind of make this happen. And Jon Favreau got with the tech team, and he wanted to have a solution that, you know, really allowed for a more realistic feeling. And so when that was adopted, then it came out to other people, and they started constructing these same kinds of studios. And visual effects departments then started spreading the word, and then Unreal Engine, which is a gaming driver, a software, started to take off more within this environment. And, you know, utilizing that tool, you're able to have everything on a similar production pipeline, whether you're working in the virtual space or whether you're working in the augmented space or whether you're working in the real world. So that's the end of this part of the presentation. I want to open it up for questions and answers.
We're right there in the middle. We already started.
Yeah. You know, this really boggles my mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
Am I keeping up the last screen?
The last screen.
The
Okay.
last
I'll go back to it.
slide.
But I want to give him a microphone.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Just good. Wonderful.
Kimmy, make this mic hot. Good. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, hello. Hello. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So I didn't really have a question, but it kind of just got my mind thinking. I can totally picture this being a multiverse featurette to help sell a film, where, let's say it's a new Bond movie coming out, and you can now actually, they'll shoot a scene where, and it's just for the featurette purpose, where you can now become Bond and embed yourself into that scene. And you're actually seeing and feeling all the action around you. Or there's like a Sharknado film or something and there's great whites coming flying at you, which is actually what's happening now in Suffolk County, Long Island. Yeah, which is pretty wild. Yeah, in real life. It just boggles my mind. And then I'm thinking, like, even a step further, I can see multiverse 3D printing 20 years down the road.
Not even 20 years.
Not even 20 years.
No.
That excites me, and it scares the crap out of me at the same time. Because I think human technology could potentially be heading towards a Terminator type of scenario. and it's funny because we think it, we see it in the movie, oh, it's just a movie. But if we see it, if we feel it, if we can think it, we can manipulate that technology, and it's a movie, yeah, but down the road, this could very well be real. But it really is exciting.
In future, that's what you're dooming us all.
No, I don't mean to do that. I'm not meaning to do that. But I'm just saying, it is really exciting. Yeah.
The AI is listening.
Yeah, but let me, to your point, while there's a lot of questions, I only have like a few minutes.
Sure.
To your point, so my company, Zavatar, we were part of an artificial intelligence accelerator, one of the top 11 in the world. And so I spoke at one of their conferences. They asked me to speak at their conference here. And the conference was all about what you're talking about, which is making sure that those safety protocols are in place. And so the people that are working in that particular space, they're also, as hard as they're working towards advancing that technology, they're working that hard towards securing that technology and ensuring that that doesn't happen. So, I mean, I can't make any promises, Skynet, I can't make those promises, right. But I think that the people that are really behind it, that their heart is into advance humanity and to advance technology. But they're also very well aware of exactly what you're talking about. So, yeah.
Real quick, the dangers that you're looking at in terms of like that's not as scary as some of the things that you're ignoring. A good example is the incredible amount of hope that's being put in NFTs and crypto, which I completely disagree with the use of those particular things. They're great for artists, but they leave audiences behind. Most things that you're looking at that you should be scared of are going to have negative economic repercussions. And like, to be scared of the technology and think that the world is going to shift into kind of like AI-driven machinery is much less likely than to think that people are going to essentially build fake markets with non-commodities and steal a bunch of money from people. That's much more likely.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, good point. Okay, so I'm sorry, sir. Before you, the woman that's behind you, she raised her hand right after him, and then we'll give it back to you.
Thank you so much, and I'll try to keep it very, very short. I want to bring it back to reality a little bit. I want to talk budgets.
Yep.
Many moons ago, I looked into doing a project that was a VR project, and at that time, it was a crazy amount of money.
Yeah.
I imagine today that's much better because we have so much available to us now. But I still am very interested as a producer as I'm looking at budgets comparable to what live action films are, or even a small indie are using this kind of technology. Is it comparable? You talked about we may not need crews, but you're going to need somebody to do
crews.
something.
Yes, smaller crews.
Right. So how does that look, or are we seeing those types of dollars?
Yeah, so it's
equal
going to,
out?
yeah, but it's going to work in the inverse because you're not going to need as many crews, and the cost of the technology is going down. Okay. So that is going to save you money. Even a couple of years ago, the prices were like, very, very high. But since the cost of the technology is going down and there's more people, programmers, going into the industry, you're going to have a lower cost coming over time. I think that he's going to stop me now. So can I have 2 more questions? Just 2 more? Well, I want just 2 more. Okay, so the gentleman there, make it quick.
Yes. First question is relating. These will be 2 quick questions. I know that Unreal
One
Engine,
question.
Okay.
One per customer.
Okay.
Well, one thing is that the virtual trailers already have been done. If you ever saw Blade Runner Replicant Pursuit, that was done for Blade Runner 2049. That was very neat. The second thing, that was pretty fast, right?
Yeah.
How do you think? This is something I couldn't find any information on the internet. Is I know Unreal Engine, for an example, they make their money by making royalties off of the games that use it, based on some of their sales.
That's one part of their model. Yeah.
Do you have any idea how they're going to essentially tax you on that with things like a TV show that's on Disney Plus that's entirely through subscriptions?
Yeah. So those models are being created right now, and so we're in those conversations right now because our show again is going to be in the metaverse and it's going to be on terrestrial TV, and so we can kind of. That's a great question. We can talk offline about that because I just don't want to.
To answer your question, it's very simple. It's an acquisition. It's not royalty based.
Really?
There you go.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you very much.
And then one last question down here. Oh, did you have something else? I'm sorry.
I'll let them go. I'll ask you after.
Okay.
I probably have like
just
20
wanted to
minutes of
ask
questions.
Because I love the way that you put it about, we're not just looking at VR because we want to put a headset on, although I have to say I'm actually that much a fanatic. But what stories do you think really are, what do you see as the most how the technology best tells the story? What do you see?
Right, so the technology changes, and what I mean by that is AR is different than VR, right? So it becomes about whether or not you want to engage certain aspects of certain things. One example is VR right now is being used for things like historic preservation. And so you have communities that are not going to exist at some point soon. A good example is Stiltsville. And so how do you create stories inside of Stiltsville that end up creating preservation opportunities, right? But are also engaging. If you wanted to look at it in the broader commercial market sense, you could look at the nature of VR and how space engages inside of VR differently than it does in real life. AR, you can look at the incorporation of digital assets inside of a physical space. So it's just a different kind of paintbrush. That's really all you're looking at. I think it's important and it's limiting to look at this emerging technology from a strictly technological point of view, because what it does is it alienates a bunch of people who are actually able to fund it. And so you have a room full of people who are going, this sounds like a really fantastic thing, but since I don't have a degree in computer science, I don't really care. And I think being able to translate what those things are to them in a way that's palatable, by virtue of explaining to them that a Stiltsville story can be a love story, for example, about a place that no longer exists that we all knew existed. And so from that perspective, you're able to translate to someone what the technology does, but looking at it from a human point of view. This has no utility outside of the human interaction. That's it. The technology is not its own end, at least in my opinion. The way humans use technology is the only thing that matters. And so one way we can use that is for social justice storytelling. We could use it for historic preservation. We could use it for physical preservation. We could use it for its utilitarian effect on our budget. By the way, a budget of less than $250,000 for your VR project isn't going to work. Yeah.
Not yet.
Yeah.
It's not accessible.
But beyond that, I think that's the thing that we have to get through to people, is that all of this is about human interaction. It's just a different way to interact with human beings. So from a storytelling perspective, that's obvious. It's a little less obvious when you start talking about the way technologists use it, but it's still the same. Prashant, you were talking about Madagascar, going through these different things. Human interaction. It's all it is. So it's not different from all of that. It's not separate. It's still relative.
And I'm going to piggyback off of it. That's great, Ron. That's why we have Ron on the panel. One of my favorite VR projects is this documentary called Traveling While Black. It won a Peabody Award. It's by the production company, a friend of mine, Roger Ross Williams. And that documentary takes place, for the most part, in this cafe in DC, which was one of the cafes during the civil rights movement that a lot of the civil rights activists and people in charge of the civil rights movement, they coalesced in that particular restaurant. And so it was an interview with the woman who owns that restaurant and an interview with some of the people that were involved in the movement. So just imagine you're in this experience and you're looking at the interview, but you can also look around that cafe and the people that are looking at that interview. And then it takes you to a part where you're on a bus that's traveling through the South. And you look to your left, there's cotton fields. And so a screen comes up, and then the person that's talking comes up on the screen, and as you're going past these cotton fields, when you can see what's going on, you feel this experience of a lot of what was going on in those times. It's a whole different kind of storytelling experience. And I think that that's what's going to carry through, this whole storytelling engagement, immersive, engaging media. So I'm going to end it. JL's going to kill me. Thank you all very much.